Gary, welcome to Anti-Racism Live.
Well, Jeremy, it's good to talk with you again. Absolutely.
So the first question I'd like to ask you, Gary, is could you tell us about your work and mission?
Yes, the work I'm engaged in and have been engaged in over the last 30 years has been how do we create a world that works equally well for everyone? And I'm now with the New School on Race, Power, and Political Economy in New York. And what we do is we really do research and analysis to really get at what are the big issues that we need to challenge that get at the issue of race as an underpinning of economic inequalities in this country and across the world.
Okay, thank you, Gary, for that. The next question I'd like to ask you is why is the 21st of March the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination so important to you?
Well, I've had the opportunity to work all over the world on issues of racial injustice, but I think I bring it back to a personal issue, and I think for all of us, all those folks that are listening to this, comes back to kind of your personal story. And I remember being a child and not really understanding why things were different for me than my colleagues that I went to school with. I remember going in my first grade class, and it was a newly integrated school, and being called the N-word, being beat up by kids in the first grade. Think about that, 5 and 6-year-olds attacking someone because of their race. They had to learn that from somewhere. They had to get that from somewhere. They weren't born with that, but it was something that was pushed onto them by their parents and others in their environment, and that came down to me having to suffer some of that. So, from an early age onward, I was the victim of police violence. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where George Floyd was murdered. And this was normal. This issue of both police violence and racism was a normal occurrence in my everyday life. So from a personal story to seeing that we could make a difference, I've worked on in places and in spaces that have really been able to make a difference on these issues. I've allied with folks across racial spectrum to address the underpinnings of racial inequalities in America. And I think that there is hope, even though at times it just feels like there's too much. Right now, as an example, one of the things that we're working on is what we call baby bonds, which is a approach that actually can get at the scale of economic inequalities and address these issues from a young age by investing in young people. So a baby bond really is a bond that young people would get as they were born. And then when they turn 18, they can invest in themselves. And our research has shown that it won't solve the total problem, but it's one of the things that's working at the scale of the problem that actually could reduce economic inequalities by 50% in America and across the globe, I would argue, as a way to make these investments. The issue of how wealth and how wealth is used in America and in Europe and across the globe, particularly in global north, how that is used has created the kind of dynamics that we have. And race, whether you were in India, whether you were in China, whether you were in Africa, whether you were in Latin America, whether you were in America, northern United States, any of these countries use race against Native Americans and other indigenous people, and that created some economic inequality. Oxfam just released a report on this issue of global economic inequalities. Now, why am I talking about this? Because when you look at those that benefit and those that have been oppressed or suffered because of this inequality, what you can see is that there are ill-gotten gains that have been going on for centuries. And we're not going to address these issues with small solutions. We really have to work at the scale of the problem. And that's why we're focused on both guaranteed income for folks. So every person, just think about every person in the world that would have a guaranteed income to ensure that they had food, shelter, clothing. That would transform our world to something that actually we could tap into the human potential of every individual on this planet to address some of the big problems and challenges that we have. So why am I working on this? Why is it important? Why is it that everyone looks at their personal story and then actually takes that personal story and uses that as the fuel to address what I see as a world that works equally well for everyone?
Gary, thank you. Very interesting and incredible work that you're doing now. So, the 21st of March, the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Anti-Racism Day. Where do you feel, Gary, the global community is at this particular point in our history in relation to eradicating racism?
Well, I think we have a long way to go. The UN and the declaration that was signed in 1948, and then the Human Rights Declaration that was signed in Durban in 2001, and I was there at that conference, actually has designated this day as a day to address racial inequalities in the world. And racism more specifically. And the reason that was done, and the reason that the Durban Conference and the Bandung Conference and other worldwide forums have said that we need to eradicate racism, in part is because it has been used as a means for people to actually oppress each other and take resources away from each other. If we're going to be a world that works for everyone, we actually have to eliminate not only racism, but sexism, homophobia, and other isms that actually have driven kind of humanity to not live up to its full potential. And so this day is so critical in this time. And your question was really about how do I feel about it today and what can be done? I'm two minds of that, Jeremy. On the one hand, I think that they're, clearly with the wars, the violence that we see throughout the world that is perpetrated by those that have, and in many cases against those that don't have, that those dynamics won't lead to a world that works for us. And then furthermore, if we're going to tackle issues, the big issues that we have before us, like climate change. And when I say that, what I really mean is we sit at a precipice that if we don't do something to address what's going on in the world around climate, none of us will be around. If COVID and that whole adventure that we've been on and still are on, taught us anything, is that we are all tied together in a web of humanity. And so if in fact something happens to me, it has an effect on you. It has effect on everyone. And unless we get at the root causes of the issues of economic inequality, and race sits at the bottom of that, colonialism, neocolonialism, the idea that someone, because of this color of their skin, is different, is at the root cause of this. And institutions have been built on the issue of racism. And so we need to tear down those structures. And this International Day Against Anti-Racism is one of the bright spots, I would say, in this continuing fight that we have. Now, on the other hand, I do see hope, meaning even though we see wars and pestilence and issues, we do see that folks are in position that they hadn't been in 50 years ago. People are in power that actually have a different point of view on these issues. So we actually have the chance and the possibility of actually moving the needle on racism in across the globe if we work together. Then finally, I'll just say I'm participating in a world conference on remedies to racial and ethnic inequalities in Durban, South Africa, coming up in the fall. And part of the reason that we're pulling together a broad cross section of people around the world is to actually meet and talk about how we can address remedies as opposed to talking about what happened in the past and how bad it was, et cetera, et cetera. How do we get to the positive side of that picture? And believe it or not, there's people from all over the world, of all genders, of all races, of all colors, that are actually moving together to try to address this issue, including what you're doing, Peace One Day is doing, to try to bring us together around this issue. So now is the time. Now is the critical point to make that happen. One of the things that we need to realize is that at different times in human history, and even before humans were on the planet, there have been these approaches that are called punctuated equilibrium. So when the meteor dropped on the Earth and killed off the dinosaur, that was a transition. It was a huge transition that happened. That part of the reason we are here, if you believe that theory. Part of the reason I'm raising this issue of punctuated equilibrium, we are now in another point of punctuated equilibrium where things are changing rapidly, where while it looks really bad, we actually have the opportunity to take what we have and actually transform these institutions so that we redistribute wealth in a way that's fair and equitable for everyone.
Gary, incredible. It's always informing, inspiring, and completely engaging to be with you. And thank you for sharing all of those thoughts. Gary, I've been obviously saddened and sort of frightened and confused and feeling somewhat disempowered by what we've been seeing happening in the world as a consequence of the conflicts that are going on. I mean, they're happening across the entire world. But as a result of what we're seeing at the moment, the increase in hatred against different communities has been absolutely shocking to us all. What's been your view and assessment of what's happening right now within our societies and communities?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I'll just say, I'll use this as a metaphor. So I used to run a health center, and it was the largest health center in the state that I was in. And I came outside one day and I saw this young African-American man, and he had a broken arm. And I said, oh, what happened? And he said, well, somebody killed my brother and shot me in this community that we lived in. And I'm going to get them back. I'm going to go out here and I'm going to get revenge for what happened to me and my brother. And I had a good talk with this young man about what his options were. And I took some time to actually sit down with him and think through what that issue of revenge meant. And so I'd say that's a metaphor for a lot of what's going on in the world. Something happens, and people are taking revenge, and then I come back and take revenge. And that doesn't end anywhere but a cycle of violence, a cycle of pestilence, a cycle of just brutalization, I'd say, that happens in these communities. So for me, in order to move, there was a great saying, I'm not sure who it's attributed to, but hatred does not address hatred alone. Only love can overcome hatred. And so the question that we ask about this is that we can't use the methods that have been used historically to oppress people to change the conditions that we have. We actually have to come at this from a point of view of loving each other, appreciating each other. Now, it sounds trite, but the fact of the matter is that it really is love that is going to transform this world. It's really love for each other and moving out of I'm going to get revenge and moving into a caring for each other. So corporations, governments should actually serve us as opposed to us serving them. So the idea that you can have a mass of wealth, and according to OSPAN, over 400 years it would take the billionaires today to spend the money that they have. So in their lifetime, they would never be able to spend that amount of money that they have. Why wouldn't we take those resources? And I'm not saying we should take all the money from billionaires or anything like that, but we really do have to think about how wealth is distributed so that everyone has the opportunity to live up to their full potential. And in order for that to happen, it actually has to be love that takes us there, not hatred.
Well said, Gary. I totally agree with you. And really inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. Gary, can I ask you, so look, we look at history and we see what's going on, and we see information coming from the Institute for Economics and Peace, and other information, other sources that are telling us about this continuous increase in violence. So, for example, for the last 23, 24 years, with just each year, it's the situation has been getting, unfortunately, a little worse, to say the least, right? So I'm wondering, do you believe, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but I want to ask, do you believe, given you're seeing what you're seeing today and how the evolution of how humanity is playing itself out as I look through the lens of my camera, for example, do you believe that we can change? Do you believe we can come together as one? Do you believe that we can turn this around? I mean, do you really believe that?
I do. But I don't think we've reached the nadir, meaning the lowest point yet, to make that happen. I do have hope and opportunity. Now, it's not just built on Gary has hope and, he's a thousand flowers bloom kind of person. But I do think that when people see that they actually have the power to transform communities, we've seen this over the history of our world. We've seen it during the civil rights movement in this country. We've seen it during the revolution that happened in India. We've seen it in the transformation in African nations. We've seen it all over the world where people can actually come together and transform something from nothing, if you will. And so I have to believe, I have to in my bones believe that there's a better world for all of us. And I see people coming together around climate change in the same way. And I see people coming together in different places around racial inequalities in the same way. And so the world has changed and shifted. And I know that the road is long and that it is a tough road to hoe. But I think if enough of us band together with peace in our hearts, with love in our hearts for others, that we can change, not only change, but transform the current systems that exist that perpetuate violence and brutalization of people because of their ethnicity, because of their race, or because of greed and hoarding that's going on in this world today. But that doesn't mean I'm always upbeat about it. That's for sure. In part because we see the atrocities that are going on. We see what's going on in the Middle East today. We see what's going on in Ukraine. We see that's going on in these small countries throughout the world that people don't even hear about where violence is taking place. So it is an uphill battle, but it's one that we can win if we believe that we can actually transform that. So I believe that the young people, my belief and hope is in younger people that are coming up that see that the way and the trajectory that we're on is unsustainable. And so I'm really counting on these young people that I see stepping up to the plate and actually trying to take on some of these big challenges that we have, and they're having some impact. So I'll stop there, but I don't think we can give up now. I think that the road ahead is difficult, but it's one that we can win.
Amazing, Gary. Well, listen, I'm like you. I'm going to get up every day and work as hard as I can, and when I'm never going to stop, in round putting constructive narrative into the world that informs, inspires, and engages around the issues that we've come together on now a number of times. So I'm with you completely, and thank you for sharing that. So, okay, I want to ask you, Gary, where did you get your hope from? I mean, what happened to Gary maybe when he was younger? I mean, somebody inspired you, right? Somebody got you thinking that you could do the incredible work that you've done and share the wisdoms that you've shared today. Where's the hope come from, Gary? Where's the belief to never give up?
Well, I was fortunate. I had an uncle who got me involved in social change early. We started a food co-op in a poor community. We did a lot of different things. We traveled across the country working with the migrant farm workers, and we worked with the American Indian movement. And he actually inspired me that your life, that this gift that we've been given of life is to be used to make a difference for others, to actually build a path that me just becoming wealthy and rich and living well isn't the kind of life that actually has value and that brings each of us the quality of what this experience, this spiritual and human experience that we're engaged in. So that's one. I think one of the things that really caught me, and it was when I was very young, I heard a speech by a woman named Fannie Lou Hamer, who was part of the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party. And she was attempting to get into the Democratic National Convention and her delegates. And that speech was so powerful about why can't I not sit at this table? Why can I not be part of this dream that everyone else that has a different skin tone than me can sit at? That was so inspiring. I was just a young kid. And then, it was clearly, I grew up during the civil rights movement in America, and leaders like Martin Luther King had a huge impact on my belief that the real only way to get there is through nonviolence, that the only possible means that we have to approach the situation is not through, again, using the same tools that have been used against us, but to use our soul force to make a difference in this world. And at the end of the day, we're only given so many breaths, so much life, so many heartbeats. And if you're using that as the rent you pay for living, then you are striving to make a difference for others, no matter where you're at in this planet. I've seen people that have been without, to have nothing, absolutely nothing, that actually have reached out and with generosity, with hope, and with love, make a difference for others that we're also suffering from the same fate. I've worked in some of the poorest areas in this country, and I can tell you that there are people that I've learned so much from because they're not dealing with this from a material point of view. They're dealing with it from a spiritual point of view of how do I help others become better than they could be without some intervention or some help. So seeing those examples have really made a difference for me in terms of why I've dedicated my life to make a difference for others. And I see the hundreds of thousands more. So I want to be humble here because there's so many people doing so much more. There's so many people that have really sacrificed so much. I see my colleagues at the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy that have given up so much so that they could actually move the agenda at the scale that it needs to be in order to address some of these issues. So I think I'm not doing enough to make a difference for others.
Well, you're certainly doing enough, Gary. That's for sure. But I guess you feeling that you might not be doing enough is what keeps you doing so much. So I think that might be a good thing for humanity. You keep doing it at the level of which you're doing it, and we're a better place for it. So, thank you for that answer too. I want to ask you, Gary. To the person maybe feeling disempowered, right? A little bit. They're seeing everything that's going on. Maybe it's tough times for them. They feel maybe a bit unequipped to be able to be a part of the elimination of racial discrimination. I mean, what resources or organizations or words of wisdom would you give to them to help them, I don't know, be informed, inspired, and engaged towards, being part of the journey towards the elimination of racial discrimination?
Yeah. And, what I can say is that don't give up. Don't give up hope, and don't give up the aspirations to move forward. I know the road is difficult. I know the challenges that you may face seem insurmountable, but don't give up. Keep moving, keep going, keep striving for that impossible dream that we can make a world that is a better place. Wherever you're at, know that there have been people that have sacrificed much for you, even to draw breath. So it's in your power today. It's in your power to actually get up, and I know how hard it is. Think about people like Martin Luther King, who was under threat of assassination on a daily basis and finally lost his life through assassination, whose home was bombed. How did he get up every day? How did he face those challenges? Or other heroines or heroes that have made a difference. We are all living the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is all of our own story. And the story really goes that you were born somewhere and something happens to you that's devastating. And you then have to take on something. And in this case, we're taking on racism. We're taking on peace. We're taking on the idea that wealth should be distributed fairly throughout the world. And by taking on these issues, as we do this, what you'll find in your journey, and this is the story of the hero, that people come along and help you out of nowhere. They will come and help you. You will meet wise people on this path. But those that don't take the journey, that don't strive, that don't get out of bed, that don't want to do it, won't be able to live to their full potential. So I say this not out of any kind of, I've got the answers, or, I say this with deep humility. Keep fighting the fight for justice, for peace, for anti-racism. Keep fighting the fight to ensure that women and men can live equally and have the rights over their own choices that they need to make. Keep fighting for the right for your mother and father, for your sister and brother, for future generations that will look at this time that we're in and say, this is the time that made a difference, that now I can stand up and be who I am and live the dream that I want to live in wherever I'm at, be it in Zambia, be it in the United States, be it in Europe, be it in China, that I can actually live the life that I need to live on right to self-determination on my own terms. And so I would say to you, please do what's right for others, and you will be rewarded. The rewards from the work I've done have just been so fantastic, because it's not about accolades, it's not about awards, it's not about anything like that. It really is about the people that come up and say, hey, when I looked at what you were doing, it really inspired me to make a difference. And that is the biggest reward that you can have. It just fills your heart with joy to know that you're using all the skills, all of the gifts, all of the privilege that you have to make a difference for others.
Gary Cunningham, I am honored to know you. Thank you for participating in Anti-Racism Live. You're a really kind man and an absolute inspiration, and I wish you the very best on your journey.
Thank you, Jeremy. And you are an inspiration to me as well. Anything I can do to support you. Thank you.
Good luck, Gary.
Good luck. Thank you.